brainchild. You have to kind of like really divorce yourself from the attachment to your ideas simply because they're ideas. You have to be very objective about what is working, what isn't, and you have to be able to move on very quickly. My name is Jad Halawi. That's the Arabic pronunciation. Halawi for the Westerners, from Montreal, Alawi. So I'm Lebanese Canadian. I grew up between Canada and Saudi Arabia, and eventually kind of found my way, worked in the oil and gas industry after studying electrical engineering in Montreal. Traveled all across West Coast Canada, all over the Midwest in the US, and I worked a bit in Norway in oil and gas, offshore. And then my friend gives me a call to invest in his idea. That invitation to invest became an invitation to become a co-founder after he got into an accelerator. So quit my job in Canada, moved here within literally 2 weeks. I had left Canada and arrived to Dubai, and we built a company called Washmen, which was the first mobile-based laundry service in the UAE. This is 2015. Uber was was making waves around the world. Everybody was so excited about what it was doing. And so we wanted to be the Uber for laundry, and we kind of rode that wave, and we got accepted into the accelerator, and we got seed funding on the back of that. I want to say that wave, that trend was going on, and quite quickly we recognized, in fact, our business was very different to Uber, and that early realization is kind of what allowed us to get to where we are today, because we had to make operational changes to it. I won't get into that. I'll leave that to later parts of the interview, but. So that's kind of a brief history of how we started. And, 5 years later, COVID has passed, quite a few other crises have passed, the regular journey of startup challenges that we've gone through, we've managed to survive them. And now we are in probably the best position we've ever been as an organization, slightly beaten, slightly bruised after COVID, but definitely very healthy and recovering strongly.
Good to hear. Good to hear. And it sounds like a bit of a roller coaster ride of you getting into the business then. So going from potential investor, living abroad, to suddenly move into Dubai and a completely new industry. So what was that like for you personally, leaving a big company in another country to come do this?
So I think when you're employed in a company and you're very ambitious, you kind of have these two dreams that one, you'll climb the internal ranks and you'll become very, very like senior within the organization and you command a lot of power. Whether that's in the same organization you climb, or if it's in a different organization, you might be climbing from company to company. And then there's this other dream that you may one day leave this job, you capitalize on what you've learned, and you finally do something for yourself. I worked for a company called Schlumberger, which was an extremely organized, structured company. It was one of the rare companies where your boss would love for you to take his job. And so that kind of like political maneuvering was not present at the levels that we were at, and would not be present for many years to come. And however, it was very demanding. It was a field job. So I was working in the oil and gas fields, like literally on the oil rigs. And while I quite enjoyed it, my life was quite out of balance. I was working 2 weeks on, 1 week off officially. Unofficially, I would be working like 10 weeks on, 2 weeks off. And then, I would accumulate my days off, and then I would take summer off. And it just became, after 5 years, it became very challenging. And, throughout these moments of imbalance, I always asked myself, what do I do next? And so the way I approached it was, I knew that one day I had to have the option to leave. And one day I knew that I would have an opportunity that I could not pass on. And I kind of asked myself, what are the things that I need to have in order for that opportunity to not be missed? And my answer to that was I needed to have people usually say a cushion. My answer was I had to have a sofa. And what I mean by that is I had to have enough money saved for me not to worry about my transition. So when the opportunity came, it was very quick, within a 2-week time window, with the same intensity that I used to put into my job, where I had to stay up 54 hours without any sleep and work outdoors at -29, -53 even at some points in time. With the same level of intensity, I ended up leaving my job in oil and gas and moving to Dubai. And it was literally 2 weeks left my car in the parking of the company there in Edmonton, Alberta, never recovered it, bought a two-way ticket, not knowing if this business was going to succeed. I bought it to return in October. October became February. And then February 2016, I still haven't had time to go back to Canada, even though I miss home, miss seeing, I miss Montreal. And yeah, so I just left my job. Within 2 weeks, I was in Dubai. And it has been a roller coaster. And I think it's just kind of a nice origin story when you think about the level of intensity required to start a business and the fact that usually you have to prepare for opportunities to come. And when they come, you have to pounce on them.
Yeah, absolutely. And it sounds like you really pounced on it. So what was it like coming into the business as a co-founder with I suppose at least the basics of the idea already there. So what was that like in terms of joining someone else's vision?
Yeah, so that's a very good question. A bit of background, my co-founder and I are friends since high school, since we were 15 years old. So I've known him for quite a long time. We went to university, both of us in Montreal. We lived together shortly, and then we always explored business ideas. So it was not the first business idea we had discussed. However, through his exposure to banking in the region, he had a lot of issues with laundry, and I had visited him before, and I had seen him use a laundry service. So when the Uber wave was going on, and then he said he wanted to technologize laundry, it kind of made sense. Frequency was there, average order value was there, and the industry was extremely outdated in the way that it operated. So it made sense. Yes, it was not my idea or my vision, but the idea, and when he presented to me the idea as an investment opportunity, I saw that I could build it. And when I voiced that, within a couple of days, that became an invitation to come and help build it. And at the beginning, you kind of have to be very willing to cede way and listen to the other person's idea, because they've really thought about it much more than you have by virtue of having committed to the idea before you have. And as time evolves, that level of deference kind of decreases, because the insights, the actions that you guys are building and doing together generate insight, and that insight evolves continuously. And then all of a sudden you have more, you start having relatively more insight to compare to what you had before. And hopefully you get to a point where your insights are equal in value and equal in relevance to each other. So yeah, at the beginning, I would say you have to have a lot of deference. You have to pay deference to the original idea's founder. And then after that, you kind of have to work towards having an equal balance in terms of how to contribute to the growth of the idea and the business.
Yeah, it sounds like the belief was there from all parties straight away. And by the sounds of it, you got it all together in this accelerator program, got the seed funding. So at that point, what were the first things you then had to put in place to really grow this as a business?
So both of us are non-technical founders. So the first thing we had to put in place was someone in tech to manage the outsourced development that we were doing. So we managed through one of our mentors in Flat Six Labs, who was at that point not the founder of a massive $3+ billion company. It was Magnus Olsen from Kareem. He was very generous with his time, even though I had probably seen him 2 or 3 times. He gave us so much time on the phone. He referred us to a person they had interviewed at Kareem that they didn't hire. And we ended up hiring him as a senior engineer, and eventually became the first CTO of the business. He contributed a lot to the business, and we just kind of had to make sure that we were always translating business requirements into tech. So that was the most essential thing to put into place. Second was to always be riding the wave of all the latest marketing trends. 2015, Instagram was still brand new. Like when you advertise on Instagram, people assumed you're a huge business. So we were always in the spirit of trying new things out, whether it was in the form of content. Like video content was not big. Advertising videos was not big. We were early on that. We were early on Instagram ads. We tried a lot of things online and offline. Some of them worked, some of them didn't. The spirit of experimentation is very, very important. Not being married to your ideas as kind of, your brainchild. You have to kind of like really divorce yourself from the attachment to your ideas simply because they're ideas. You have to be very objective about what is working, what isn't, and you have to be able to move on very quickly. That was essential. We were very close to our customers. People hear that a lot. It's almost very generic, but I want to kind of show you how close to our customers we were. We had our app. It was a web-based app at the beginning, and we had a tool called Mixpanel installed inside, where we could actually see what customers were clicking and how they were moving throughout the app. And we had intercom, which is a chat tool that allowed us to kind of chat directly with the customers. And
Mm.
so we were watching every new customer's journey within the app. And if we see that they stalled somewhere, we would immediately message them manually. This is not automated. And we would communicate with them and kind of get their feedback and see what they were saying. And since the app was hosted on a website back then, we were quickly iterating and including the features that they requested within hours, sometimes days, but sometimes hours. They had a new button on the app just because they asked for it. And that level of like closeness to customers allows you to generate insights that your competitors cannot have by virtue of not having the technology that you've installed into your application. Two, by virtue of them not having the conversations with their customers the way that customers want to have them. And then three is that by being able to do one and two, you're able to like kind of include that in your product development roadmap, which you've already structured to be very quick and very efficient. And so that level of closeness, iteration, and then accuracy allows you to build relationships with customers that are very hard for them to forget, especially in the early days. Actually, the first cohort of customers we acquired in October 2015 until today, they retained to above 50%. It's like that cohort of customers in that first month is doing so much better than some cohorts that were acquired in 2017, 2018 in the scale-up phase. So that was essential to the beginning of the company. I could go on about a lot of other stuff, but those are the core elements of it. And then you derive everything from there.
So as much as this is about the laundry, about the logistics around it to make it happen, it sounds like it's also quite tech heavy, which is interesting to say that both yourself and your co-founder are non-tech in a way. So I see that you're currently recruiting for engineers in Beirut. So why that split in the business? Why have you got the tech side in Lebanon?
It was just a matter of convenience. So in 2018, when we were fundraising, in fact, our plan was to open a tech team in Russia. And Russia being a place where a lot of good tech talent is available for a rate that is much cheaper than Dubai. Furthermore, the person we had recruited, who ended up being the person that built the team in Lebanon, is married to a Russian lady, and they were willing to relocate to Russia, to Moscow, where they would be building the team, where he would be building the team. We went to Moscow. It didn't work out. And unfortunately, it didn't work out because just like it was very hard to get people to work for a company that does laundry in Dubai. There was not much interest. And so we ended up building the tech team out of Lebanon. It was a matter of just convenience. It was a financial consideration more than anything. The geography was just a matter of convenience that this person we hired happened to be Lebanese and married to a Russian. If the CTO had been Jordanian, maybe we would have opened in Jordan. If he was Egyptian, maybe we would have opened in Egypt. Coincidence that has thankfully worked out very well for us.
Yeah, it sounds like flexibility has been quite a big part of your journey in terms of when you're experimenting, being flexible and not being married to ideas, but also with where the talent is effectively. So what are the real challenges when running a team split around the world like that?
So I think depending on the kind of business you're in, the challenges would differ. We are not a software as a service business. We are an operationally heavy business, and we do a very peculiar and particular type of operation, which is laundry, which has a lot of its own challenges. So being able to translate exactly why we are doing what we are doing and why things need to work a certain way and what is the offline movement that we're trying to translate into software is especially challenging to communicate when people have no frame of reference for it. So you end up having to really over communicate and be very thorough in your communication. And that is not something we learned very early on. It took us about 1.5 years to figure out how to communicate certain things, how to ensure that like an API response is 200 or 300 milliseconds or less, even though the operation it's performing is very heavy. Because sometimes you could build code that would respond in 5 seconds, and everyone's like, yeah, it's all right. If it's a consumer product and I need to buy something, I'm willing to wait 5 seconds. But if I'm processing 7,000, 8,000 items a day, those additional 4.8 seconds are extremely heavy to the operation and have a financial impact. So that has been a very challenging thing. Building a culture is also difficult, and making sure that it's homogeneous. But the way we decided that it had to happen is that the CTO had a lot of liberty to build a company culture in Lebanon that reflected the kind of energy that we had in Dubai, but also that had its own personality, its own character, its own vibes. And being able to kind of let that happen was challenging, because a lot of the times you kind of want everything in the company to be homogeneous, but the reality is Lebanon and Dubai very different. Weekends here are, Friday, Saturday there, it's Saturday, Sunday. You have to kind of accept that, and that reflects on work ethic. People there live with their families quite a bit, whereas here a lot of us are expats. So family time, commitments on weekends, much more difficult to work on weekends compared to working on weekends here. So you kind of have to be mindful of that, and let things take shape. And like you said earlier, be flexible and understanding that, as much as you want to operate a company that's homogeneous, you should let things grow organically also.
And it sounds like, although maybe for convenience, Lebanon has become a big part of this company, really. So
it is.
Just before we jumped on this call, you were explaining a bit around your funding process. So for those listening, it'd be great to hear a bit more about that.
All right. So we were fundraising our Series B, and we, like I said, we had already established in Lebanon. So just by sheer luck, the fact that I'm originally Lebanese, and that we had established an office in Lebanon made us qualify for something called Circular 331. Effectively, Circular 331 is an initiative by the central bank in Lebanon to provide banks with the ability to invest into tech startups in order to stimulate the economy. Classic scheme that is deployed in South Korea very heavily, and many other parts of the world. So we managed to raise around $1.5 million from that circular, but that money came in quite late. And part of that, the conditions of that fundraise is that you have to spend those $1.5 million in Lebanon. And since that money arrived late, we had funded quite a bit of the growth that we hired for in Lebanon. We ended up spending that from Dubai. And come October 2019, we were meant to be literally on October 2nd, I believe, or October 12th, 2019, I sent an email to the bank to wire the money from Lebanon to Dubai. I think it was a weekend or something. For some reason, it took a bit of time. And October 17th, all hell breaks loose and protests are happening on the street. And then the bank stopped transferring money out of the country. And all of a sudden, we found ourselves with north of $700,000+ in Lebanon that were meant to come to Dubai. This is in addition to the money that was meant to stay in Lebanon, staying there. And Dubai became, I wouldn't say cash strapped, but all of a sudden you have to reconsider all of your plans. We have to reconsider all of our plans for Dubai. And that kind of took us a bit of time to, reconfigure the business, reconfigure the plans, and like kind of change the approach to growth, because we still wanted to grow. We didn't want that to stand in the way, but we had to change our approach to it. And then we managed to kind of figure it out by February, let's say by February 27th, and then COVID hit us by March 18th. So we had 18 days. And I was saying the growth between February and March was astounding. We were growing 20% month on month. And for a company that's 5 years old to be growing, 20% month on month with very limited marketing spend is incredible. Like, we had figured out the operations, we had figured out the communication, we had figured out the incentives on the marketing side that were not paid marketing. Things were going very well. And then COVID hits and you find yourself in a very different predicament. So our challenges started before COVID. And
how did you manage that with, I'm thinking particularly with the team. So as the founder, you know the ins and outs of what's happening with the money and when it's likely to come in and so on. You have full visibility of that. How do you translate that to the team and make sure that, one, that they stay motivated, and two, make them realize the urgency of finding new ways of working and making it through tough times like that?
So without getting too much into the details of this person we said this to and so on, I'll start very high level. And if we want to dig into cases, we can. At a very high level, you have to over communicate in these situations. You have to tell people what you're thinking, because everyone is wondering what's going on. And by everyone, I mean everybody from directors to junior software engineers to like the person who's ironing clothes. And we were very deliberate in how we communicated what was going on. And so starting with the directors, they were of course asking questions quite early on. And we kind of gave a, I wouldn't say, we kind of gave a very, I wouldn't say clear playbook, but as clear as it could be given the uncertainty that we had in hand. And I think we executed on it well enough. Uh, Not as good as we would have wanted to, but again, uncertainty was present, and this is how we did it. We said, currently we are generating this much revenue. If revenue drops below a certain level, we will have a certain burn. If the cash burn reaches a cumulative amount of this much, then we will have to, reduce salaries by X amount. And if it happens again, we have to like lay you guys off. This is with the directors. With the other guys, we said, let's say middle management, we went and said, guys, we have to take salary cuts of X%. We don't know how long this lasts. And we anticipate that, it will be at least until August or September based on what we see right now. And based on the fact that we won't be able to recover revenues fast enough and recover the cash burn that has happened. And we had these conversations personally with everybody. When it came to the drivers, and the laundry staff, we also had a very similar approach where we spoke to the drivers personally, and we had that one-on-one conversation with them. Maybe it was not one-on-ones, but it was kind of like 1 to 5, 1 to 6.
Mm-hmm.
And with the laundry staff, to the degree that it was possible, we spoke to also all of them, 1 to 5, 1 to 7, and explained the situation, explained the uncertainty we were going through, and just tried to keep clarity. And you would want to believe that by saying it once, you don't need to say it again, but that's actually incorrect. It's the reality is people want to be reassured multiple times, and they want to hear the same thing over and over. So we had to repeat the message multiple times, and we started doing these weekly calls that we should have been doing before, but we just never did. We started doing these weekly calls on Thursdays, which is the equivalent of Fridays in the West, where we kind of just did a town hall, talked about how we were doing, talked about the recovery, talked about our initiatives, so how things were going on. And then just kind of kept everybody in the loop that needed to be in the loop.
And you mentioned that a big part of the recovery was actually just reacting to the situation, particularly through COVID, yes, by launching new services. So tell us a bit more about that.
So as with, I hope, most businesses, there's a lot of latent potential that needs to be untapped. And in our case, we had always known that there was kind of a segment of the market that we hadn't tapped into or really grabbed yet. We had been observing through our data that a lot of customers were using our wash and fold, let's say laundry by the pound service, to do their linens. And we said, what if we let you do that for the same price, which is like whatever, like 12, 13 pounds for 10 kgs of wash and fold. What if we let you do that for the same price and we offered ironing as well? What would that do? And what if we made the color of the bag that we gave, that you put it in, pink? What would that do? And so we went to market, we surveyed customers. Customers seemed to like the idea. We went to market with it, and it allowed us to recover the loss of workwear, shirts, suits, pants, blouses, skirts, which had dropped by up to 90% at some point in time. So when we launched this linen service in June, we were still down 75% on workwear. And while yes, it's not as strong and the revenue isn't as large as the revenue you generate from workwear, it was sufficient to help us ride the wave of the lows of COVID and help aid the recovery, and also allowed us to acquire a lot of new customers that had very different profiles to the customers we had always been acquiring before. So we were sitting on this idea for quite some time. COVID just put a lot of urgency on us to execute on it. And we wanted to try something new. The way we launched the service was very different. We literally created, obviously now everyone has stories in their apps. If you remember, like there's a joke on Twitter where like even Twitter all of a sudden has these little circles on the top, and if you click it, or sorry, the calculator app has these little circles at the top, and if you click it, it gives you a story. We did that same thing, but that was really beneficial to us because we managed to get the word out about home care very quickly, and it allowed the adoption rate to increase very quickly over the first 3 weeks. And right now, home care is, yes, it's not a very large part of the business, but yeah, it contributed to the recovery of the business and helped us expand our reach. And now that we're ready, now that we're in good financial shape, we're ready to market, and we have a much bigger pool of customers to market to.
And what's next for the business then? What are the big goals over the next year or so?
So COVID, like we were saying before the call, COVID has beaten and bruised us a little bit. Part of what we're doing now is just still stabilizing the ship, reconfiguring marketing, thinking about this newly discovered customer base that we had never looked at, marketing to them, growing their revenue. This is the short-term plan. Medium-term plan is we think that there's a lot of dormant opportunities in the laundry sector, not in the laundry services sector, but in the laundry product sector. We think a lot of what happens in this region when it comes to laundry products is not targeted to the region, meaning like, why is it that the smell of laundry detergent is the same almost everywhere in the world? Whereas here in the GCC, we love smells. Like we love very nice scents, very warm scents like oud and amber musk and so on. And we spend money on scents. We think that there's a latent opportunity in the laundry detergent space that we're willing to consider and explore. That's kind of one thing we're willing to test out. We think the laundry software, as boring as it may sound, is extremely complex, and there's a big opportunity to go after many laundry players and empower them to optimize their operations the same way we did during COVID. We managed to untap 40% extra productivity in our laundry with the same number of people that we had during COVID, just by virtue of like having the data that our software generates and knowing where to put people in the process, instead of like loading one part of the process too much. We figured out how to balance the load across the different parts of the process in order to maximize the number of garments we were cleaning every day with the same number of people we had. So that's kind of one other opportunity that we think could be big. And long term, we think we have, if we manage to get one of the two right, we will have either cracked a very large regional market if we go with the first route. And if we go the second route and that succeeds, then we will have literally built the infrastructure for laundry in the internet age. What the fuck does that mean? It's like, it's not very clear, but what that means is there's a habit that customers have right now everywhere in the world of going to laundry shops, showing the clothes, showing what the stain is, and getting that comfort. And I think that comfort just stems from trust, from the fact that you can look at somebody and tell them that you really care about this item. And I think that there is an opportunity for us to create software, not just for us, but for many other people to use, that will allow laundry players around the world to give that same level of comfort to customers using applications without having to come to stores. And then to automate the entire communication chain that happens after, from a very sophisticated process where sometimes you have a tear, sometimes you have a broken button, sometimes an item needs to be recleaned and won't be ready in 2 days. And how do you manage that communication at scale, given the modern communication infrastructure, which is like no one wants to get a phone call. WhatsApp, SMSs are spam in the region and in many other places in the world too. Maybe you want a WhatsApp, maybe you want a notification within your app. How do we give everybody that infrastructure for laundry to happen on the internet? Whether that's mobile, whether that's WhatsApp, whether that's WeChat, it doesn't matter. We just want to be able to provide all laundry players around the world with the ability to serve their customers well, with software that is very relevant to the day and age we operate in.
Sounds like an exciting time for the business. So where can people find out more about both yourself and the business?
So about the business, www.washmen.com. If you go to YouTube and you search for Washmen Dubai, you'll find a lot of like quirky videos and funny videos. Washmen app, if you go to App Store, Play Store, Washmen Dubai, you'll be able to download the app. Even Washmen, you'll be able to download the app and see what we've done there. Myself, LinkedIn, Jad Halawi, JADHALAOUI. Twitter, Superficial Jad, you can link it there. But yeah, Superficial Jad on Twitter, Instagram, not really active. And if you want to hear more about what I do, I hold a lot of conversations with interesting people. We also touch upon business. I have a podcast called Peace of Mind, like a piece of mind, PICE of mind. And if you search my name on Apple Podcasts, you should be able to find it. That's about it.